try to not take too much time. So let's begin. What I thought I would do is give you a little bit of the thinking that we have as business angels when we look at deals, and then a little bit on, as an entrepreneur myself, when I start thinking about doing a financing round, what are some of the questions that I ask myself? And then I will pass it to Corinne. So very quickly, indeed, I became a business angel 14 years ago, and it went from something that was a little bit of a hobby to actually a profession. And many times you're going to have a choice between going with business angels or venture capitalists. And both can be very good. Sometimes we co-invest together, but there's some fundamental differences, usually on how we approach an investment. As a business angel, it's really I as an individual, and I've decided to allocate a certain amount of my wealth. Ideally, it should not be more than 2 to 10% of my wealth, and to making investments in startups. And usually in the back of my mind, I have statistics that kind of say, make sure it's your play money, meaning money you can lose, because probably out of 10 investments you will make, 4 will probably die, or because you won't reinvest, they will die, or 4 will do okay, but there might not be a great exit market for them, so you could get some of your money back, but probably maybe not a lot. And then you're hoping that 2 will do well, and not just do well, but exit so that we can have some money back, so it covers the losses or the others where we won't have much. And all of this is usually, ideally, we shoot for 5, 10, 20% annual return a year on that portfolio we're building. But again, we're prepared to lose it all. But the key for us is usually, how do we at least get some cash back so we can continue to invest? Because when we meet many of you, we know when we make an investment, we're going to have to wait 3, 5, 7 years to get some money back. It's a long period to wait. So liquidity, how will we get our money back, is a topic. So once we kind of say, okay, this is the amount of money I have, we usually really try to be clear. And as entrepreneurs, it's very important when you do enter due diligence with investors, is to yourself have a list of questions you will want to check out about the investors, because you're going to be with them for many years. And so understanding what are some of our motivations. And usually we're here to make money, but we almost always have at least one other reason of why we are a business angel. And again, because we have 2 wings, we're known of providing money and also a number of other things. When we look at a venture capitalist, and I wear both hats, Corinne wears both hats, Nicolas wears both hats, there all of a sudden, we are investing other people's money. And we've been entrusted in that money because of a very specific investment strategy, a very specific timing that we've been given of both to invest but also to return cash back. And we will only be able to do that again or also make real money if there's some real capital gains. So that's what I try to remember as the key difference. At the same time, there's definitely things that probably venture capitalists bring that maybe angel investors might not bring, especially if they're not as experienced. Okay, so that's a little bit, and I'll go through 3 or 4 slides and then open up for questions. So that's a little bit about who we are. Now, when we think about when we come and where we are in the spectrum, 2 things to notice. First of all, it's true that we don't come in right at the beginning. And that's why when we're doing pre-pitches, as we were doing this afternoon, looking for our 2 investor groups with IM Capital, of which ones would make sense to invite, a lot of times we like to wait until the entrepreneur has some traction. Why? Well, there's 3 kind of big reasons. The first one is there's still so many teams that after 6, 8 months, they realize, well, maybe entrepreneurship's not quite what I'm ready for. Or we have a fantastic idea, but it's just not the right timing. Maybe in 1 or 2 years, that's when my idea will really be there, because it's very hard to have a brilliant idea, but you have to create the whole market demand. So we prefer that at least that phase, in a way of risk, is gone. The second, and I would say one of the biggest ones, we really value entrepreneurs tremendously. We know what it's like to have to get up every day and kind of go for the challenges that you face. And take no's for, okay, maybe not now, but I'll be back tomorrow, and have to go back. And therefore, for us, it's important that we don't own so much of the company or have so many clauses that you will feel as entrepreneurs of, what's the point? But that means that the business needs to be a certain amount of size so that when you come and raise $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 with us, we and you feel that the company already has a certain value, that we will not be the majority shareholder. So that takes a little bit of time to get to that point. And last but not least, you'll see in one of my slides coming up, the biggest factor that we use, at least for the first couple of rounds, is the team. Because so many other things will change, but most likely the personalities don't change too much. Therefore, for us, it's really important before we come in that we have this famous family and friends, and hopefully not fools, but people who know you, who've looked and said, wow, she's an entrepreneur. She has what it takes, he has what it takes to be an entrepreneur. We're only one of many now, so we don't need to be super early. And more when we invest alongside other types of investors. And this afternoon, out of 6 pitches, 2 said, hey, by the way, we're going to do a Kickstarter campaign, which definitely can come. It's a bit tricky to know who do you get first, what kind of investor do you get first, and especially making investors that then are ones who will open doors to the future types of investors, not close, but that can be a whole other workshop that maybe we'll do another time. Now if we go to, so you have a little bit our mindset, you have where we see a little bit where we come into play. Now, what is our typical investment cycle? And obviously, since we're all about building portfolios, we repeat this a couple of times. Well, at first, it's really about developing an investment strategy. So we know that we're not just shooting in the dark. And for example, that's something, Corinne will tell you more about our groups, but that's something both of our groups have done. So today, probably at least 2 of the entrepreneurs that we are going to say no to about presenting to us is not because we don't think they're good. It's just we don't see they fit quite the investment strategy that our investor groups have set up. And then we go out and meet you, and in places like this at all sorts of accelerators or other places. And we usually have a presentation, and as an investor group, we decide, okay, do we enter due diligence or not? We're really trying to make sure that within 6 weeks of the time we start due diligence, we can come back and say, yes, it looks like we're interested in investing or not, which then from that point is usually negotiation, discussion about creating a win-win environment, both on company valuation and clauses, and then we'll do the deal. And then comes the part where it's really important that both sides really add value, and that's usually when we're managing and working together. That's 3 to 5 years. And usually about 2 years before potential exit, we start again reworking very closely together to either you're going to buy back our shares, or we're going to jointly look for an acquirer, or maybe we will sell our shares when you get a much larger investor in, okay? And the cycle repeats itself. Now, what do we look for? One of the reasons why many of us who are business angels, we have quite a lot of business experience, because there's no real data. Or today, again, the 6 entrepreneurs that we met, they all had financial projections, but nobody really knows. Is it going to be $1 million in 2 years, or is it going to be 5 million in 2 years? Or is it going to be 300,000 of revenues? It's very hard to know. But at the base for me, and that's one of the advantages I feel of having done this for 14 years and being myself an entrepreneur, it's really the team. And I didn't say entrepreneur, I said a team. Just like this afternoon, there's one deal where we had very different opinions on the deal, but anyway, the key was he is still a loaner. He's done a lot as a loaner, and he's got 1 or 2 people who have no shares, but he put as his members of his management team. That's really hard for us to invest in kind of a great individual, but not yet a team, because who knows what can happen. Plus, we don't think, even though as entrepreneurs, we're usually unbelievable multitaskers, and we're quite lateral thinkers, so we can go from all sorts of areas of our business. It's still really great to have 2 or 3 people who can go through the fun and the hard times. So we look for a team. And there's 4 or 5 key dimensions that we look at in terms of what do we say, okay, she or he, wow. And that team really's got kind of the entrepreneurial aura that we think will enable them to go through all of this really fun but challenging journey. After that, we've got, and that's the base. After that, we have, whether you're a startup or much bigger, we look for things in the business, we look for things on the financial and the business model, we look for certain things on, as I had mentioned, the valuation, the exit, the terms. But on top of that, I would say is pretty much standard for almost any business. The roof of the due diligence, I call it my due diligence house, is who else is going to come with us as investors. Because there is going to be a board, there is going to be value brought by investors. Are we aligned between ourselves? Are we going to be collectively a positive force or negative force for the entrepreneur? Or are we going to be disputing a bunch of things between ourselves, which honestly then is a total waste also for the entrepreneur. So that's very important when we invest, and for you as entrepreneurs, when you look, it's not just who's coming in, but how will the investors work together. So my last one is, anytime as entrepreneurs we begin thinking about, okay, am I going to go raise money? It's very much like investors. Before we start making investment, I really recommend that you kind of take a sheet, and even if we never quite follow it, it's good to at least have thought about it and ask some core questions. The first one is, why am I raising? Because bringing on shareholders, whatever type they are, that is a change. Already bringing co-founders is a major change when it's your baby. So bringing on investors is important. That's where it's important to get to know what are the different types of forms of financing, and especially for those where you will be giving up some of your shares, it's important to think about it. And I don't know about you, but whenever I go out for financing, I always have a backup plan, which might mean that my business might stay very small for a while, but when we go out financing, usually if you're the CEO of the company, even if we've got a great business, it takes a good 50% of our time. For even the fast deals are kind of 3 months from end to end. Therefore, it's really important that you have a backup and that somehow you create another miracle, like many miracles you do, which is that the business is still going to show some good news while you're raising money. There's nothing like when you're an investor and you like a deal, and every 2 weeks you get that little email from the entrepreneur saying, and by the way, you know, when you first met me, I told you I would do this, done. And then 2 weeks later, and that other thing, client, I told you I'd get, great. Or that hire, great. We need, as investors, we need that. So it's true, it's a time that is extremely tiring because you're still running that business, trying to get it. You're raising money and you need in your back pocket, what if it doesn't work? What if I don't raise? Or what if I don't find the kinds of investors that I feel will really live my values? Then that at least I haven't now jeopardized the whole business, okay? So that's the piece I would say is the most important thing to do. The next one is thinking about how much money you're going to want to raise, not just for this round, but planning for the next rounds, because that would also help you think, what kind of investors do I need now, but what kind of investors later on? Of course, the timing. So how much time can I afford this to go on? Sometimes it's good to say, you know what, if in 4 months I haven't raised, that's when I stop. Or usually what I recommend or what I do for my financing rounds as an entrepreneur, I always have 2 or 3 weeks where I'm going to go and feel the market, because I have a valuation in mind, I have goals in mind, I have a use of funds in mind, and I'm just going to go out there, feel the market. Because the minute I go out and I do my first pitch, there's a clock ticking. And investors know each other. And if it's been 3 months and a new person sees me and says, wait a minute, didn't you already pitch somewhere? And you kind of say, yeah. And they say, well, so how much have you raised? And you say, well, I have a few letters of intent, but nothing. It's going to be like, forget that deal. It's cold. It gets cold quite quickly. So I try to prepare so that my timing when I'm out there, within 3 months, I know I either will raise or I will just stop and say, fine, in a year I'll try again. Then, of course, it's what kind of investors. We come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, experience, values. So that's very important that you think about it beforehand. And one investor, many investors, etc. And last but not least, do you want to do it all alone? Or there's people who've become experts now of helping people raise money. If you do take somebody, make sure it's really somebody who knows how to raise money and really does have contacts, because that can be like anything, like working with anyone, and that it's really needed. Because if you are, what's fantastic in Lebanon is now we're starting to have a true ecosystem of investors, of investment of sources of funds, of co-investors, of VCs. So actually, if you have a deal that fits pretty well the key criteria I mentioned before, there is money. And I don't know if you really need a third party to help you raise that money. And in any case, best of luck. It's never easy. So a little bit of final tips for the entrepreneurs, as I mentioned. And if any of you are thinking of becoming investors, or if you want to get a little bit more in the mindset of investors, all of the groups that we do with IM Capital, and Corinne's going to talk to you about, is at Go Beyond. We're a pan-European and US angel platform. We look at every investor's portfolio, and we see which ones are making money, which ones not, and we try to extract what makes an angel successful or not. So if you want, you can download, I have a few, but you can download it on go-beyond.biz, and there you'll get a little bit more of the insights of successful angels. What do they look for? How do they invest? That can be useful for the entrepreneurs. But here's some few things. Learn and be prepared really to have multiple rounds of financing. You often, if you think you only need 2 rounds of financing to get profitable, it's probably 3 or 4. And last but not least, make sure that you also conduct due diligence on the investor.